Hello, everyone. My name is Elin. I work at Spotify, and I am very excited to be here today because I get to nerd out about one of my favorite topics, which is feedback. So yeah, I have a fancy title. This is a talk about feedback. And I want to start by sharing a short story. So somebody once told me, and not just somebody, so this was my first week of university. I was out with one of my new classmates. We were walking in the forest, trying to find a bike, as one does. And at some point, as we were walking along, talking, getting to know each other, he kind of turned to me and asked, why are you so loud? Like, it's just us here, we're in the forest, it's quiet. You don't need to speak as loudly as you are. It's like, do you know that you're loud? And this was one of those kind of mind-shattering moments in my life. I was 19 years old when this happened, and this was the first time anyone has ever told me that I was loud, like in a kind of general conversation way. And this was one of the things that really made me understand that there are some things that you just can't know about unless people tell you about them. And the kind of mind-blowing thing is that there are things that you can't know about yourself unless someone tells you about them. And this kind of sparked my interest for feedback. And when I started working in my professional life and feedback became this kind of formalized tool, I geeked out about it even more. And I think it's really cool. So I want to talk about it. And I mean, this is because we learn from feedback as human beings. So if you want to learn about things, being good at feedback is useful. So I want to talk about 3 different topics today. So the first is just to establish what feedback is. And then when we know that, I want to move over to talking about working with feedback and how we work with feedback in our day-to-day lives. And I want to finish off by talking about feedback for personal growth specifically. So, first part, what is feedback? I have a dictionary definition with me. This is from the Merriam-Webster dictionary that defines feedback as the transmission of evaluative or corrective information about an action, event, or process to the original or controlling source. Now, this is a lot of words, so I'm going to break it down a bit. To the original controlling source, this is you. Or if you're the one giving the feedback, this is them or it. It's the thing that gets the feedback. There's an action, event, or process that takes place. That means that something happens or someone did something. Something triggers feedback. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. There's evaluative or corrective information about the thing that happened, So again, not information just out of nowhere. It's information based on the event. And then there's also transmission, which is basically communication. Someone or something is communicating this information. And specifically, they're communicating it back to the original controlling source, which means that if we look at this from kind of a systems theory perspective, if you have some simple system, some input, some output, if you put a feedback loop here, it looks like this. It branches from the output, because the output is something that happens, and that's what we can give feedback upon. So that's the evaluative or corrective information, and it goes back into the system. If it doesn't go back into the system, it's not feedback. And we'll get back to this in a second. So now I've also said evaluative or corrective information a couple times. Now these are also pretty big words, so let's do some more dictionary diving, shall we? And this is easiest to do if you look at the verbs, not the adjectives or adverbs, whatever it is. So here they are. Correct means to alter or adjust so as to bring some standard or required condition. Evaluate, on the other hand, means to determine the significance, worth, or condition of something, usually by careful appraisal and study. So basically, correct is this is the right thing, let's correct it. Evaluate, you need to determine, you need to figure out what's the significance here, what's the worth. So if we look at corrective and evaluative feedback and information, this means that corrective information is about some kind of standard. It's reasonably objective. It's either kind of true or false statements, so like, this was the right thing, this is the wrong thing, or it's following some kind of principles or guidelines that are agreed upon at your company, across the industry, globally, whatever it might be. Evaluative information, on the other hand, depends, because there's no correct answer. There's no constant purpose or outcome that's kind of globally agreed upon. It depends on the situation, it depends on the person, it depends on the system, it depends on whatever it is. When we speak of corrective information, the purpose and outcome is more constant, as long as the answer or principles or guidelines that it's based on are valid. And this means that corrective information could technically be given by anyone, as long as they know the right answer, or they're aware of the guidelines, and they can actually judge the situation. Evaluative information can't be given without knowing the purpose or the context. So it's not enough to just know, like, oh, here's the right answer. It's like, well, there is no right answer. So some examples. Does this code work? Like, does it compile? Is it logical? Am I doing what's expected of a senior engineer according to our career framework? Career frameworks generally, here's behaviors we expect to see from a senior engineer. Are you following those? And lastly, on a similar note, based on solid principles, what should the system look like? Is this dependency inversion? Is this single responsibility? Some examples of evaluative information and feedback. Should this code be merged? Doesn't necessarily just include if it works. Does it solve a problem in the code base? Is it cohesive with the rest of the code base? Depends. What should I do to grow my career, or be a better engineer, be a better human? This is a very different question than, am I following our career framework? It depends on who you are. What do you want? What are you good at? And lastly, because we are at a conference, should I be using Jetpack Compose or Flutter or that other thing I heard about at droidcon last week? Maybe. Does it solve a problem that you have? Will it work in your code base? Will it work at your company? Then yeah, sure, maybe. Otherwise, maybe not. And now these things, this exists on a scale, just like a lot of things do. And there are some things that can be kind of in between. So I was in my example from earlier. Hey, you're loud. In my context, I would say this was very much corrective. It's like, you are loud, let's be less loud. But it might be more on the evaluative side, depending on things like stereotypes or social constructs. And the example is, you might tell someone that they're loud, even while they're not the loudest person in the room. You should speak at droidcon as a piece of advice that is very much on the evaluative side. I mean, to most people who are Android developers and want to speak at conferences, I would recommend it. It's a great conference, great organizers. But I might not tell my doctor that they should speak at droidcon. So this is what feedback is. And even though there's a lot of words in the definition, if you break it down, it's about communicating to correct or evaluate some kind of triggering thing to whomever did the thing. So now that we know what feedback is, let's talk about working with feedback. And now most of you, when you hear feedback, you might think development talk feedback. Who here has some kind of formalized development talk cycle at their companies? Okay, so a fair amount, cool. And this is, for the people who have it, this is a kind of a big formalized way that we work with feedback, once or twice a year, or whatever your setup is, where you kind of go, like your manager asks you to ask people like, hey, how am I doing? And then you get that feedback, and then you kind of piece together a development plan. And this is a big and important way that we work with feedback, but there are tons of other ways that we work with feedback in our day-to-day, our week-to-week, and our month-to-month work. And the first example I have of that is code reviews. Code reviews is feedback on the work that someone is doing. And while we are working on our code reviews, we also work in our IDEs. And sometimes we have a CI system set up, continuous integration system. And you get feedback from Android Studio when your code isn't compiling correctly. From CI/CD, you can get like, hey, your tests are broken, you broke this thing over here, you're not following the static analysis guidelines. And I bring this up because even though this is kind of machines giving the feedback, it is also people writing these error messages and like static analysis checks on the other side. And if you do that, that is feedback. So think about it as that. Retrospectives is something that we do as teams generally, where we kind of look back at the last sprint or month of work. What were we trying to achieve? How did it go? What should we change? And that's kind of forward-looking or backwards-looking. And if you think forward-looking, we talk about planning. Where do we want to be? What should we do in the next sprint? Will we have time for it? Is it the right thing to do? RFCs, or requests for comments, are documents and a kind of format for presenting ideas, design review, or system designs, strategies, things like that. It's like, here's some background, here's what we're trying to do, here's a couple of approaches, what do you think? Very formalized way of getting feedback. Related tech strategies. So developing tech strategies, generally you start out with some kind of product strategy, like here's what we want to do as a business, and then we look at, okay, so what should we do from the tech side in order to implement this? What are things we're missing? And also just any time you find yourself asking something along the lines of like, hey, what do you think about this? This is you asking for feedback, even though it's not like a big formal once a year kind of thing. And so yeah, my point is we give feedback all the time. And what I want to do now is I want to give you something I'm calling the feedback formula, which is basically based on the definition that we talked about. Here's a model for how to think about feedback. And I'm hoping that you can take that back in your day-to-day life and kind of look at the feedback work that you do day-to-day, week-to-week, and kind of see, like, what am I good at? Are there things missing? And what are things that I can improve? So, from the definition of feedback, we have basically these 4 ingredients. And if you have these 4 ingredients, you have feedback. So, action, event, or process, some kind of evaluative or corrective information, transmission to the original controlling source. And the feedback formula is pretty simple. It's pretty much identifying these ingredients and then baking them together to a delicious pie. So, first step is, what was the action, event, or process that took place? And to learn about this, we need to gather examples, specific, objective, and observable examples. Because remember when I said this, feedback comes from the output? It doesn't come from the thing itself. And this also works if we put a person here. And specifically, the output of people are their behavior. It is what they say, and it's what they do. So you can't give feedback based on like what you feel about a person. It's only what they do and what they say. And this is the same for teams as well. So if you're working with the team and they're like, hey, how is it working with us? You can look at what they do and what they say, not like how did it go or like what did you feel about them or like you got really annoyed at them. So like keep it objective. When we know that, we're able to figure out, okay, so what's the evaluative or corrective information based on this event that we can provide? And this you can do in kind of a 3-step process. First of all, just look at and understand what is the purpose or desired outcome here. And this is extra important if it's evaluative feedback, because remember, this is when there's no correct answer. And if you don't figure out this answer, you might be giving some kind of feedback, but not evaluative, like useful feedback. Once you know that, the next step is to figure out what was the actual outcome of what happened. What were the like real-life consequences and impact? And when you have those two, you can start looking at the difference between them, basically. So say, my purpose, I want to bake a brownie. And if I actually make brownies, then like, cool, you did the thing, great job. If I bake banana bread, then the difference is like, that's a big difference. And then you could give some feedback on like, well, probably if you find the recipe and it says banana, it's probably not gonna end up being brownies. So like, maybe be a bit more critical about the recipes you use. And then once you know this difference, this is the evaluative or corrective information that you can offer as the feedback. After that, it's time to figure out like who or what was the original controlling source here. What's their role? What's their work context? It's good to know what their relationship is between you and the source. Like, is this your manager? Is it someone you work with? Is it someone on like a far away team that you kind of saw once? And the next step, which is related, is what is the level of trust between you and this person? Like, if it's your best friend, you can probably just be like, hey, what the fuck? If it's someone that you like just met, you probably don't want to go there. And lastly, it's time to figure out like how will the transmission back to the source happen? Like, how will you package this and how will you give it to this person? And now this is fairly easy when it comes to like code reviews and like RFCs and things. When it happens, or like when this is about personal feedback and people, it gets really complicated because human communication is complicated, especially if it's kind of difficult feedback. And I'm not going to talk too much about that. Oh yeah, these influence each other. Forgot that slide. But yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about like the intricacies of human feedback communication. These are two great talks about that I would recommend. There are links in the slides. They will be somewhere online after this. And they get into more of the intricacies. So this is the feedback formula. So yeah, this also looks like quite a lot. But again, it's about figuring out what happened, what perspective can you give, who did it, and how will you tell them about it. And I would say you're probably following this already, even if you have never seen it before. And that's because, yeah, we do work with feedback all the time. A lot of these things we just do kind of on autopilot, subconsciously. And my hope is that with this model, you can go back and kind of be more aware of how you follow the formula. Are there steps missing? And are there things you can improve on? Because, yeah, you're probably following it in parts, and maybe you can complete it. And speaking of that, I want to talk also about two of the most common gaps in the feedback formula that I tend to see. And the first one is giving non-feedback as feedback. And by non-feedback here, I mean things that do not tick all of these 4 boxes. So we're going to do a mental exercise to kind of fill this out with a couple examples. So yeah, remember this example? I told you this is not feedback because the information is not going back to the source. So it's ticking 3 of the boxes. There's some action, there's evaluative or corrective information, and you're transmitting it, but not to the person who did it. This I call gossip. And not like gossip, like negative gossip, like, oh, they're so bad at this. It doesn't have to be that. It can be positive things as well. But if that information doesn't get back to the person, both they never know about it, and they'll never be able to learn from it. So like giving feedback to someone's manager, or like telling their team that like, hey, this person did a great job. I mean, it's nice, but as long as that never gets back to the person, it's not feedback. And what about if it looks kind of like this? Like if the feedback doesn't come from some output, it's just kind of based on the person. And this, I would tick like this. So there's no action event or process here. But there is still evaluative or corrective information that's transmitted back to the source. It's just not about anything in particular. This I call a judgment. And again, it's not necessarily a negative judgment here, but it's like, this is my judgment of you as a person. I might think, yes, I think you're a kind person. I don't know why, I have no examples, but that's my judgment of you. Feedback, on the other hand, would have been, I think you saw me be really cold last week, and so you gave me a hot cup of tea, and I felt that was very kind of you. So that's a difference there. And lastly, what if it's like not really solid information that gets back to the person? Basically, what if it's like it may or may not be about some event, but it's not evaluative or corrective information, it's just information? This I call advice. And feedback and advice is not the same thing, if you look at the definitions because of this. So this would be something like, like the information is not about the person, it's not about their goals, it's not about what they're trying to achieve. It's just like, I think you should go speak at a conference. I don't know if you like speaking at conferences or being in front of people, but I think so because like that's some information I have for you. And my point here is not necessarily that non-feedback isn't useful. It is very useful. Like, I have gotten great advice that has nothing to do with me as a person, but I was able to use it anyway. I've also gotten really shit advice that is like, nah. But it's not feedback, that's my point. And if you're aware of this, then you can be more like, well, I can't offer you feedback, but here's some advice instead. Take it or leave it, I don't know. So that's the first kind of big gap. The second one is not as much of a gap, but it's establishing the what in terms of like the purpose or desired outcome, but skipping the why. And so I'm going to use some examples to illuminate this. So question one is like, what are you trying to achieve? This is like generally the easier thing to figure out when you're trying to figure out the like desired outcome. So some examples. I'm trying to get promoted. We want to launch our product in a new market by the end of the year. I want to spend more time coding and less time in meetings. Now, if I only know this about you, I could give you some feedback, I can give you some advice and things. But if I go on and dig deeper and ask why do you want these things, I can give you much more targeted information. And I'm going to use this last one as the example here. So why do you want to spend more time coding and less time in meetings? Well, because our meetings are useless. Like 2 people ever speak, the rest are silent. If we try to talk, the 2 people speak over us. We never get anywhere. It's just a waste of time. Our code base is really slow. It takes forever to get anything done. And if I just need to go to meetings all the time, like I just don't do work because it's just too slow to do so. Or we have a really clear roadmap and backlog. Like we don't need to sync up on this every single week in order to execute on it. Oh. And now my feedback in these scenarios would differ a lot. In the first example, it's like maybe you should take some time and effort to improve your meetings. Maybe teach some facilitation skills. Maybe pull these two people aside and like talk to them about like, hey, you have to let other people talk. And then if the meeting quality improves, you might not actually feel like the meetings are a waste of time anymore. On the second one, I would say maybe it's time to talk to your tech leadership about investment in your code base and your infrastructure, and like maybe it's time for like remote Gradle caching. Because I mean, this slows everyone down, but also if that's not like the biggest issue in terms of getting to the meetings, then the meetings could also probably be more productive. And people will probably be more involved in the meetings if they don't feel like, oh, I'm not getting anything done because like Gradle sync is slow. And on the last one, I would say this, like on the surface, this sounds great. It's like, yeah, maybe you don't actually need these meetings. But I would also maybe put in a challenge that maybe the roadmap and backlog is very clear to you, but not the other people in your team. And like, it could be that if this is like a full team thing, maybe you could actually minimize it. So it's like, it's your EM, it's your PM, and like 1 or 2 engineers that could do this and the other people get more time off. But maybe, yeah, maybe there's engineers onboarding and maybe they should also be in this meeting to get the understanding that you already have. So that's the difference here. So it's not necessarily that you can't give feedback if you're just establishing the what, but if you know the why, it's generally just a lot easier. And I would also say that this is where we make assumptions. If we think like, oh, you're trying to get promoted? Cool, I'm trying to get promoted. Like, here's the stuff I'm working on. You should try that. Maybe their reasons for getting promoted is very different. Like, maybe they're trying to get promoted into a manager role instead of like, oh, I want to like deepen my technical skills. In that case, your feedback will not really be applicable. And so that's working with feedback. And now I want to talk about feedback for personal growth. So this is kind of taking it back a little bit to that kind of more development talk kind of feedback that we take for ourselves and that we use to like help grow our colleagues around us. And I think of us doing this in kind of 3 different buckets. The first one is for improvement. It's like we know what we're trying to do, and we want to make sure that like we get better at it. The second one is blind spots. So figuring out things about ourselves that we don't know, increasing our self-awareness. And the last one is like learning the why. And I'll explain this more when we get to it. But first, let's look at improvements. So basically, this is, I want to get corrective and evaluative information about something I know. Maybe you're learning something new. Maybe you want to improve in your role. Like, here's what I want to do. Can you help me get there? And so let's look at some ways of asking for feedback for improvement. And basically, well, we learned a feedback formula, which is basically about gathering as much information as you can to give us as good advice and the feedback as possible. And if you're asking for feedback, you can reverse that and provide as much information as possible to make it as simple as possible to give you good feedback. So what are some actions, events, or processes that you want the feedback on? Go and gather the examples. What did you think of this RFC that I wrote? What do you think about this system design that I came up with? Was it good or not? And make sure that they're known examples here as well. Because if you're asking something like, hey, what do you think of this RFC? And it's like, I've never read it. It's like, yeah, you're not going to get feedback there. And then thinking about what kind of information do you want? Is it corrective information? In that case, provide well, here are the guidelines I try to follow. Here's the correct answer that I was looking for. Can you help me evaluate this? Was it the right thing? If it's more on the evaluative side, then you can provide as much as you can about the what and the why. So here's what I'm trying to achieve. Here's why I'm trying to achieve that. Are my actions and behaviors aligned with this? Am I doing this in the way that you perceive? Next up is figuring out who you are. Ask the originally controlling source and providing this information along to the person that you're asking. What are your current development goals? What are some of your previous development goals? What have you been focusing on the last couple of quarters? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? This will probably help give you better feedback about here's a good approach that's probably going to fit you. And lastly, it's good to think about how you prefer the transmission of feedback to happen. Now, I know at least at my company, we have a very strict, this is the tool you're supposed to use for feedback, which is not fantastic. But you can ask for feedback in any way you want. Maybe you have to do that thing as well. But yeah, do you want written feedback? Do you want to get an email? Do you want a feedback form or something like that? Or do you prefer open conversation? I like a mix of the two. I like some written feedback first, and then sitting down and discussing it with the person, discussing examples and stuff. Lastly, I would say, and this is not feedback formula necessarily, but it's good to figure out who is the person that you're asking and what kind of specific perspective can they provide. And here I want to make the point that we get better feedback from a diverse group of people, just like we do better work if we have diverse groups of people. You get broader perspectives, so you get a bigger surface area of things that you can get feedback on. So when you ask for feedback, ask your peers, both the people in your team, but maybe also other teams that you collaborate with. Maybe if you have, if you know people in the droidcon, Android droidcon community, maybe ask them. Also ask your designer, ask your product person, ask the people externally to the team that you're hey, am I a good partner to you? Is there anything I can do better to make your job easier? And make sure to ask your leadership. And this goes to your manager, but maybe also managers of teams that you work with. And depending on the size of your company, maybe ask your skip level, so your manager's manager, or maybe even your manager's manager's manager, depending on how big your company is. And as long as they know about you and what you do, they might be able to give you really interesting perspectives that is difficult to get from people in your team. Next up, I want to talk about blind spots. And now, this is a clear example of the thing that I was told, that I'm loud. Because yeah, this was a blind spot. My brain did not perceive my loudness the way that I perceived everyone else's loudness. But learning this meant that I could work with it. Like, I didn't want to be a loud person. Like, I knew other loud people, they were annoying. And so what this allowed me to do was to become more aware of my kind of loudness level. Like, I taught my brain to perceive that. And I worked on it. And I would say, in most normal conversations, I mean, I might be one of the louder people in the room, but not the loudest, and it's not like uncomfortable to speak with me. Unless I get like excited or frustrated or really mad about something, and then I can get very loud. And this is something I know about myself, so like I can work with it. And I want to share this tool. There's a link, this is an example of this. But the Johari window is like this framework about how other people see you and how you see yourself, and like how those intersect. So yeah, there's this thing called the blind spot, which is how other people see you, but you don't necessarily see yourself. The flip side of that is how you see yourself, but other people don't see you that way. That's the facade. That's like who you're trying to be, and some of the time it probably doesn't work. And then there's what they call the arena, which is how you see yourself and how other people see you. This is basically self-awareness. Like, here's how other people perceive me, and I know that. So like, now I know that I can be a loud person. It used to be in my blind spot. So that's like, when you know these things, you can kind of work on moving them to the other sectors. And this is how kind of the start of this specific tool works. So basically, you get a list of many words, and you're asked to pick 5 or 6 words that you feel best describe you. And then you get a link, and you can send that around to people. It's very quick and easy to fill out. And then the prompt that the other people get is, what are 5 or 6 words that you would use to describe this person? And this is something that I think is, like, I've done this a couple of times. You learn really interesting things. And yeah, it's a very, like, easy way for people to give you some feedback. It's like, I don't know much about it, but like, here's, like, this is more like judgment than feedback, but it's still very useful for blind spots. And other ways of getting kind of information about blind spots are asking things like, what's your perception of me? What kind of impact do you see me having? And this, in particular, asking like leadership and people who kind of have more knowledge about impact and like see more, they're able to give really interesting insights on this sometimes. Other questions. What's something I do really well? What's something that you think is holding me back? Those are good prompts that have worked for me, at least. And lastly, now I want to talk a little bit about this thing, learning the why. And I'll try to explain what I mean here. So basically, what we've learned up until here is that you can give better feedback if you know what people are trying to achieve. And if you flip this, you can get better feedback if you know what you are trying to achieve. But like, how do you know that? How do you learn that? How do you know what you want to do when you grow up? Or who you want to be when you grow up? Like, these are not easy questions. Like, I know of people who are like, yes, I want this. This is like my career, like life path. It's going to be great, and like have never had any questions about it. I'm definitely not one of those people. So I've started thinking about this as like the built-in feedback machine that we have in our bodies. And if you learn to tune into that, then you're able to kind of more easily navigate your life and actually maybe even learn what you actually want to do when you grow up. And when I say this built-in feedback machine, I'm talking about how your body reacts in ways like, what sparks joy? What makes you excited? What are you really geeky about? Like, what gets you really stoked? What are things that frustrate you? Like, you cannot get it out of your brain, you're so mad about it. What are things that you do not care about? Like, you might see other people being very excited about something, and you're like, I just don't see the point. And maybe you feel bad about this. It's like, maybe I should care about this thing, but it's like, I just don't. And what are some things that you keep coming back to? Like, maybe you had some opportunity at some point, and you're like, I mean, it sounds fun, but like, yeah, no, I'm busy. And like maybe a couple years later, it comes up again and again. It's like, oh yeah, this does seem really cool. I do want to try that, but I can't. Like maybe those are things you should actually try. And you can kind of pick these things up from a lot of different places. The work that you do, like look at that, reflect. Okay, so what are the things that really get me excited? What do I want to spend more time on? What are things that I should spend less time on? It's like maybe I shouldn't force myself to care about Dagger anymore. Maybe I should just let the other people do the Dagger stuff and do something else. The feedback that you get. So you're gonna, like, just because you now know maybe better like how to get more feedback, some of that feedback is just not gonna be very good or applicable to you. But you can learn from that as well. So if you get a piece of feedback and you're like, no, I don't wanna, it's like then you don't have to. And if it's something that's like, oh my God, that sounds amazing, then yeah, try it out. And you can also kind of pick this up based on what you see other people doing. And these could be people like, oh yeah, I saw this person at droidcon and they did this cool thing, like it sounded really cool. But it could also be the people in your team. Like this person is so good at like summarizing our meeting notes and like it helps the whole team so much. Like maybe I want to try to do that and also help the team in the way that they do. And generally, like the more things you try, the more things you'll learn about yourself. And the more you're able to kind of listen to this internal feedback machine, and the more you're able to just get perspectives from the people that you work with. And I don't know if you know Hank Green. He's a content creator, author, and science communicator, and like also like generally a geeky dude. And he did a great conference talk a couple years ago. This is about 20 minutes long. I watch this maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And this is a talk about dreams and like the problems with dreams. And this is dreams like in like big life goals. And one of the points he makes is that you might not want the thing you thought you wanted. And this is something where if you set a development goal or a career goal, or maybe you had a dream since you were a kid of like, this is what I want to achieve, it could happen that like you change your mind along the way, that like actually no, it doesn't really seem that interesting anymore. But also if you actually reach it, it's probably going to be more hollow than you think. And that's just the human brain works that way. Like if we set like, oh, I want 100 followers on Twitter. If you get 100 followers, you're like, yay, 500, 1,000, more. And so if we don't think about, reaching the goals, reaching success, being hyper-focused on that, you might find that, there's other things in life. Like he said this, it's not about finding success. It's about building the number of things you're capable of. Because then you can do more interesting things. And I am definitely biased here, but I think that feedback is a very useful thing to be capable of. Thank you for letting me geek out.